In this video, we're going to talk about pre-flop calling ranges. So in our last video, we talked about pre-flop raising ranges and what we should be raising with in different positions pre-flop. Now we're going to take it and we're going to be on the flip side where we're not the raiser, but we are looking if we should call or not with a specific hand in a specific position. And I have a PowerPoint. We're going to do a PowerPoint and then we're going to use Equilab to go through some exercises to look at equities, determine if we can or cannot call based upon the criteria that we're looking at. So let's go ahead and look at some basic considerations. What are some basic considerations that we should look at? Well, the first one is the player type and tendencies. So one of the things you need to look at when you're determining if you should call or not call is based upon the type of player that you're playing against. Are you playing against a good player or bad player? And what are their tendencies? So for example, I have them all listed on here on the slide. Our tags, our lags, our nits, our loose passive, fit or fold opponents, our loose passive calling stations, and our maniacs. The reasons that I have these listed here is because depending upon their playing style, their opening ranges are going to vary widely. So if you have a HUD setup or if you're just taking good notes, you'll have a good idea of what their opening ranges are, because their opening ranges most typically aren't going to be your opening ranges. You can understand, and if you just understand basic player types, you'll know that a lag's going to have a wider opening ranges than you, as what we've preached in this class. You know that a nit's going to have a more narrow opening range. You know that loose passive players are going to have wider ranges where they're limping, but a tighter range where they're raising. Same thing for calling stations. And then of course the maniacs are going to have huge opening ranges. So that's going to be a major consideration in regards to what you should call and what you shouldn't call in various positions pre-flop. Now that relates to our opening raise position. So remember, we set up different ranges of hands that we should open in different positions. So remember, when we're out of position, we're opening up a tighter range in our style of play, and then once we get to the button, we're opening up a much wider range. And that's what it comes down to. So when we're out of position, we are playing less cards because of positional disadvantage. And then as we move towards the button, we're opening up a much wider range because we can play much more profitably there, and we can realize our equity much easier when we're in position. So remember the gap theory. Remember I discussed the gap theory. Basic concept of that you need a stronger hand to call than to raise with. And I'm going to illustrate that on the next slide. So one of the things we need to consider when we're calling is that, for example, if you're calling an under the gun raise in middle position, you need a stronger hand to call in middle position than if you were just to open raise yourself. And that'll make sense on the next slide when I do some examples. Another consideration that you need to think about are the players left to act. So the players that are sitting to the left of you at the table. You need to determine what type of players they are. If you have a lag or if you have a maniac that's sitting to your left, you need to determine that if you call this raise, are they going to 3-bet you or squeeze you out of the pot with a squeeze raise? And if they do, then you're just pretty much throwing money away if you're calling with a weaker hand. So those are some basic considerations. Before we jump to the slide, let's go ahead and go over them again real quick. We need to look at the player types and tendencies. We need to look at the opening raise positions and understand the gap theory. And then we need to look at the players that are sitting to the left of us that have yet to act to determine how they're likely to play. So let's go ahead and let's just use some basic examples where we don't know anything about anybody at the table except for standard opening ranges. And this is going to be our starting point. And then once we get into some live examples, what I'll do is I'll look at all those different considerations. I'll look at the player types that are opening and their ranges. I'll look at the players that are still left to act after us, and then we'll determine if we can call or not. So let me go ahead and bring my Equilab software into the screen. And let's take a look. So we have our first example, Queen 10 offsuit is in the cutoff. And we want to know if we can call an under the gun opening range. So without any other knowledge, we need to just automatically go back to our gap theory and understand what a basic opening range is for under the gun. And let me go ahead and pull in my table. Over here I have an example table that I want to pull into the screen. 1 second to use as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at this, and excuse me if that's not showing up properly. So remember, under the gun has a rough estimate sketch of around 9% in regards to opening range. Middle position has around 12%. Cutoff is 22. button is 39, and small blind is 22. And that's just standard, using a standard tag style opening range. So let me slide that over. And now let's visualize a 9% opening range. So I'll just go ahead and plug in 9%. And it may be something more like, let me put in some more pairs, and let me remove some of the weaker hands off of here, such as ace 10 and maybe our queen jack suited. And take the king jack off of there. And this is looking close to being a 9% range. So we have this as a 9% range, and we are asking ourselves, can we call this with queen jack or queen 10 off? So here's queen 10 off over here, and it's not even in the range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click OK on that, and let me pull my software in. And what that actually does when I say click OK is that it populates this range into here. Now, it doesn't really matter where you put this in here. I know it says middle position 2, but we'll just assume that this is under the gun. Now we'll go ahead and plug in our hand in middle position, queen 10 off, and what we're going to do is I'm going to do a calculation here. And what this does, it does an equity calculation, and it determines how well we stand against this range. How well are we going to be? Are we going to be a favorite against this range, or are we going to be a dog against this range? And when I hit evaluate, it's going to tell us who's the favorite, and it's telling me that against this range, the under the gun range is a 66% favorite to win, and we only stand to win 33% of the time. So with queen 10 offsuit against an under the gun raise, and let me pull this back open, we know that we're not a favorite, and if you look at here, it's not a good hand, so no, we should not be calling, most definitely. And one of the main reasons for that is with this gap theory. If we look at our dominated hands like we talked about before, we're easily going to be up against bigger pairs, bigger pocket pairs, and if somebody has a 10 or a queen, most likely a queen, such as ace queen or king queen, then we're easily in a dominated type of a spot. Even if they open up a wider range and they're using queen jack off, we're easily dominated. So for that reason, and just looking at pre-flop equities, we're just going to go ahead and determine that no, we should not call, simply because we're a huge dog against an under the gun range. And this is an easy way to just do off the table analysis, but it's really easy just to visualize it and determine if your hand that you want to call is not somewhere within this range and it's not near the top end of it, you probably shouldn't be calling. Because remember the gap theory, we need a stronger hand to call than to raise with in that position. So when I'm looking to call an under the gun raise, I'm looking to call with a hand that's near the top end of that range. I'm not looking to call with a hand that's not even within that range. So let's go ahead and look at another example. Next one that we have is ace 9 offsuit in the cutoff versus a middle position open. So let me pull this back up. Now we know that middle position is 12% for an opening range, and ace 9 off is what we're asking if we can call or not. So let's go ahead and let me delete that. Let's go ahead and put a 12% range in. And for 12%, let me go ahead and put all the pocket pairs in. I'm going to take some of the other random cards out of here, because I know that people like to play pocket pairs. And there we go, we are still a little too high. So that's around 12.5%. And there you go, that's close enough. So ace 9 off is what we want to call with, and here's our ace 9 off. And if I take this out, and this is actually a little too low, let me take that out and put our suited hand in as well, because I think that actually probably has a little better equity. And I think this is probably closer to what somebody would open with. So let's keep it at 12.5%. So here's an under the gun range. Now, just by looking at this without saying the actual equity calculation and without me putting it in, do you think we should call with ace 9 off? Well, remember what I said is that I like a hand that's up near the upper echelon of this range, and ace 9 off isn't even in that. So off the top of my head, I'm saying no. No, we should not call. Now let's go ahead and just plug it in. Let's plug ace 9 off in here, and let's do our calculation. Again, we are a huge dog, so this middle position range is a 60.99% favorite versus us. So definitely we should not be calling with ace 9 off. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. Pocket fours in the big blind versus a middle position open. So this is a more interesting spot because pocket fours are in this range, but they're near the bottom. And if we evaluate it, it's a little closer, but we're still a dog here. This range is a 58% favorite, but there's a lot of other aspects to this hand in regards to pocket fours that's going to determine if we can call or not. The first one is if middle position is the type of player that's very aggressive and likes to push money around, then we can call for implied odds, for set money odds, because if we think we're going to pay it off, we can definitely call. But if we don't think we're going to get paid off, then we should simply fold. So off the top of your head, looking at equity, you should fold pocket fours, especially against a tighter player. But if you're playing against a maniac or a lag that likes to defend their hand and loves to push money around, and if they get married to a hand like a top pair of an ace or a king on the board, and you flop a set and you think you're going to get paid off, then you can definitely call. And we'll talk more about set mining in a later lecture. So let's look at the last example. 5-6 suited on the button versus a cutoff open. So let's go ahead and put our cutoff range in here, 22%. Let me just double verify that here, 22%. And let me go ahead and put all the pocket pairs in. I'm going to just adjust this range a little bit, take some of the weaker cards out, and put some stronger ones in. Okay, that looks pretty close. We're at 21.87%. So we have 5-6 suited and we want to call this type of a range. So here's 5-6 suited, way down here. It's not even in this spot. So if we go ahead and we put 5-6 suited in here, off the top of my head, I'm saying no, we should definitely fold because again, we're a huge dog. And so there are also considerations for 5-6 suited. If the cutoff is very aggressive, you can call if you think you're going to get paid off post-flop. But just sticking to standard gap theory, it's just a simple fold. And I put all these examples in here because some of these hands look like they're hands that you can call with, but you definitely should not be calling with. So just remember that when you are going to call a range, whether it's under the gun, middle position, cutoff, button, or small blind, remember that you want that hand that you have to be somewhere near the upper end of their range. You don't want to be playing a hand that's outside the range that's not going to do well. So for example, if I go back to, let's go back to a 9% range. And let's put in ace queen suited. See, now ace queen suited does well. Ace queen suited is literally a coin flip, so that's a hand you can call. Another example would be king queen suited. Yes, it's only a 40% favorite, but if you look at that range, it's near the upper echelon of that range. So you want to be playing hands that are near the upper echelon in a range. And then even if against a button open, say this is a standard button open of 39%, and you want to defend your blind, you know, it's okay to be defending hands that are up in this upper echelon that you aren't going to be 3-betting for value and re-raising. So if we take, you know, maybe the top 4% out of there, which are going to be these really strong hands here, right? We want to be calling with these hands that are near the upper echelon. We don't want to be calling with hands like queen 5 suited, king 3 suited, you know, king 7, 9-7, 8-7, ace 3 offsuit, queen 8 offsuit. We want to be up near the top end. Ace jack suited, king queen suited, queen jack off, king 10 off. Something that's going to play well against that range. And that's all that it really comes down to when we're talking about this, when we're looking at it just from a really basic standpoint, is that we want to play a hand that does well against that range, especially when this hand is not a 3-betting hand. So remember, when we're at the very top of our range, and let me clear this out one more time, and I haven't talked about 3-betting ranges, but I mean, for example, a standard micro 6 3-betting range is going to be something like this. It's going to be the very top of your range, really almost the top 4% of your range right here. Pocket jacks, pocket queens, pocket kings, pocket aces, ace king, and ace queen for the most part. So automatically assume that those are the type of hands that you want to 3-bet, but hands that aren't in those, that you considering calling with or you're considering folding, you need to look at to determine if they do well against that opening range. And then also, I know I didn't really talk about them in these examples because they're really basic, but we also need to consider player type and tendency. So we need to look at the player type. And for example, right, if we're playing against a lag, we know a lag's going to have a wider opening range. So we should be assigning them a wider range. You know, we shouldn't be assigning them a 9% range on the gun. It's probably closer to 12%. And by the time they're on the button, you know, there's probably upwards of 50% of all cards being played. So, you know, we do look at situations like that, and you know, conversely, if we look at a nit, we're probably even making it smaller. This is probably closer to 29%. This is probably around 14. This is probably around 9, and this is probably around 6. So you just need to understand the players you're playing against, and then also the players that are last to act. Do you have a maniac or a lag sitting to your left that may try to squeeze you out of the pot by re-raising just to push you out? If so, be careful with what you're calling with, and be wary of those types of situations. So that's going to go ahead and conclude this lecture. If you have any questions on our preflop calling ranges and what we should call with or what we shouldn't call with, always let me know. Always happy to help. If not, we'll see you at the next lecture.
This video is a part of our Crush MicroStakes online poker course, The Complete Mastery Guide. If you like this course, go ahead and click this link here where you can get this course for 50% off via our special YouTube video using our coupon code YouTube, and you'll get enrolled in this course for only $6. Thanks for watching and hope to see you over at MicroGrinder Poker School.